And I got this inner call to start to go nomadic, to sell off all my stuff and to live from essentially a carry-on bag. Well, I always make this disclaimer whenever I'm talking about meditation, is that meditation is a very generic word. You know, it's kind of like doctor.
Yeah.
Okay. You could be a functional medicine doctor or you could be Dr. Dre. We don't know what's going on, right? You don't have to
Yeah.
agree with everything Trump does in order to want America to be healthy again. You
Yeah.
can, both of
Yeah.
those two truths can exist in the same awareness at the same time.
Well, what do you say to somebody that says, well, meditation's not for me?
I equate it to swimming, right? Now, if someone's
Light freaking Watkins, man. I can't believe this day. Long overdue, but I'm glad you're here.
Will freaking Cole, I'm happy to be here, bro.
I've known you for a long time now. We go way back in the deserts of Arizona, I think.
Yep.
The good old days
Mhm.
where, but I mean, every year I'd see you at least once a year. We used to go to Revitalize, which was Mind Buddy Green's, like, I don't know. You'd call it like the United Nations of wellness is how I saw it.
I never realized how pivotal that those events were, but I just had Dr. Steve Gundry on last week, who I met there. I've been on Rich Roll. You and I are friends. People like Shaman Dirk. I mean, there's so many people who
Yeah.
are just like, not only have they created these incredible platforms and
Yeah.
incredible bodies of work, but people are just
Yeah.
so so beautiful. It was such a rich, beautiful scene back then.
Yeah, it really was. It was like, I don't know, in our lifetime, in the modern, I would say, iteration of wellness and thought leaders in this space, like Andrew Huberman was there, and
Exactly.
like the people that everybody knows today. This was just, we were all hanging out at the Ritz Carlton and or a few different places. Yeah, it was fun for a long weekend. But all right, my friend. So what have you been up to? Are you in Mexico City right now?
Yeah, currently based in Mexico City. I came here during the pandemic, and I've just been writing. I'm in post production on my fifth book, which is about transformation. As you know,
Wow.
I've written about minimalism, inspiration, how to meditate, happiness. So I'm very much immersed in that space and just creating content, running my online coaching programs and courses, and doing retreats and all that wonderful stuff.
Amazing. So what made you pick Mexico City? What drew you to this beautiful? I've never been to Mexico City. I've been in other places in Mexico, but I hear there's something special about Mexico City.
So in 2018, I went nomadic. I was living in Venice, California, and I had
Yeah.
a two-bedroom place, like 10 minutes walking from the beach, and under market value. Like it checked all the boxes, but I didn't really feel that connected to it, even though I'd been there for like 6 or 7 years. And I got this inner call to start to go nomadic, to sell off all my stuff and to live from essentially a carry-on bag. And so I dragged it out for about a year, and then finally I pulled the trigger on it. And so that started this new era of living very minimally from it started with a carry-on bag, and then it ended up being with just a backpack, kind of like a backpack like one of your kids would take to school, like not one of those big, backpackers backpacks, but just like a
Yeah.
school backpack. And so I started this little nomadic circuit. I was traveling between Los Angeles, New York, Atlanta, Austin, London, and then occasional trips to other places around the world, sometimes Australia, sometimes Italy, sometimes Morocco. And then Mexico City just kind of made its way on the list because I had a couple of friends here, and they said really good things about it. And when I came here, I was like, oh my God, this is what I love about being in Bali. This is what I love about being in Europe. It was like this really beautiful combination of, I used to say if Bali and London had a love child, it would be Mexico City. And it has the eternal spring weather, which is what I'm really into these days. So it checks the boxes that are most important for me: sunlight, walking, and then cafe culture, and relatively cosmopolitan environment. And it's an
Very cool.
opportunity to learn a new culture and learn a new language and all of that wonderful stuff. So I decided to just, well, during the pandemic, I didn't have a, when the music stopped playing, I didn't have a chair to go back to. So I decided to make
Mhm.
Mexico City my chair. And I've just been
That's
here
so
ever since.
it's beautiful, man. So, are you learning Spanish? Do you know Spanish?
If you don't speak Spanish and you came to visit, you would think I was pretty conversational in Spanish. But to
Okay.
them, I sound like Tarzan. So I
You'd impress
recognize that,
me.
yeah, I could impress
You'd,
you, but it doesn't impress anybody who's a native Spanish speaker.
which is what matters, I guess. But okay, this is awesome. Let's talk about this. There's a lot of stuff I want to unpack with you and your work, but I want to know about this shift from, all right, living in Venice in Los Angeles, even though Venice is very bohemian, it's still very Southern California, very LA, very materialistic, to then go and have that really that act of faith of I'm going to be a nomad and I'm going to get rid of my stuff and really dive into minimalism. What you mentioned that calling, like what did that nudge look like and what was letting go of the stuff like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So to preface that story, I want to tell you a different story. So I just went
Okay.
to Colombia um, this past weekend. I went to Medellin, Colombia, which is, one of the bigger cities in Colombia. And I had had this fascination about Colombia for a while. And I didn't really know why, but just whenever that city's name came up, it kind of got my attention. And I went there and to be honest with you, it didn't really connect with it. Now, right now, there's a lot of beauty there because, as Rilke says, there's much beauty everywhere, but it didn't leave me wanting more. But the more important thing is I got rid of the thought. Now, when Medellin comes up, probably is not going to register at all. And and so all that to say, sometimes we get these thoughts about doing something, right? It could be moving to a new city, it could be changing careers, it could be anything. Leaving a relationship, getting into a relationship. And from the spiritual perspective, right? It's good to explore the thought, especially if it's a thought that doesn't go away, right? I posted
Mm-hmm.
something the other day. I was talking about how people misinterpret following your heart as, oh, I got this whim to blow up my life and move to Bali,
Mm-hmm.
and so I should do that because that's what my heart is telling me to do.
Yeah.
And that's more of a reckless interpretation of follow your heart. The
Yeah.
way I like to look at follow your heart is you have this thought, this repeated thought, and it's been happening for a long period of time. And maybe you've been suppressing it, or you just haven't had time to really pay attention to it, or it's so disruptive that it would cause you to not be able to handle the obligations and responsibilities that you have. But if the thought continues to repeat itself morning, evening, vacation, while you're busy, meditation, in all these different ways, that's a strong indicator that your heart wants you to pay attention to that thing. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
getting these thoughts about going nomadic, and then I would find myself watching a documentary about the minimalists, or I'd read a book about vagabonds, or I was drawn to these different reminders of that particular type of lifestyle. And like I said, I dragged it out for a year, and the thought was still just as
Mm-hmm.
potent. So that's when I knew I had to take it seriously. And that's, I guess, what I would say to anyone listening or watching this is that
Yeah.
if you have one of those thoughts, you have to take it seriously, because it's not ultimately about what's going to happen once you get there. It's about the whole process. And like I
Yeah.
said, I've said this before. Sometimes you have to move to New York to realize you really want to be in LA. And sometimes you have to go to medical school and finish it in order to realize you really want to be a lawyer, right? But you got rid of that thought. So there's no such thing really as a wasted experience, in other words, right? It's
Mm.
all about the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes like you don't know until you experience it. And it's people see pivoting as like a failure. You're like, I
Exactly.
think like the best humans pivot and learn from that. And, it's, and I think there's two things. It's like, just because something served you for a season doesn't mean you should make it an identity and it's forever. It may just be for a season, right?
Yep.
And many people feel like, oh my gosh, I can't go back because there's like I made this decision and I'll be a failure or a fraud if I change my mind. It's not. I
And
don't
that's
see
what
that at all.
happens a lot of times with the diet religions, right? Like I was vegan for a long time, and I'm
Yeah,
so happy that I never fully identified with that. Like I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being a plant-based, eater for 12 years. But when I got the inner call to start introducing more animal protein into my diet, I didn't feel like I was betraying, my community because that's how I solely identified. And you see this
yeah.
today. People have sort of pigeonholed themselves into these various diets. And it could be anything. It could be keto, could be,
Carnivore.
vegan or whatever the thing is.
Yeah,
But you have to leave room for new information to come through you. And if
yeah.
you're not doing that, then you start to look like you're kind of, you're not being authentic with yourself.
Yeah. I've talked about this in the pod a few times, but like we had a telehealth patient of ours, and I've seen this a lot of times, like off, like from patient confidentiality, you can't talk about this, but she came on the podcast to talk about this amongst other things. Is her name is Rachel Brathen. She's yoga girl on social media. Same thing. Like it served her for a time was to become a vegan, and then it got to the point where she was attracted so much of that sort of tribalism and religiosity and zealotry around it that she couldn't even share that she had to, for different health reasons, pivot and evolve from that. And the minute she did, there was like threats on her life, right? And it's just, I bet that could, like you said, be applied to so many different things. um
Yeah, just
so
like with
yeah,
politics, a lot of people who are so-called liberal have gravitated towards the
yeah,
Maha movement, which I love. I love seeing that because it's an indicator that people are being open-minded to new
yeah,
things, right? You don't have to
yeah,
agree with everything Trump does in order to want America to be healthy again. You
yeah,
can both of
yeah,
those two truths can exist in the same awareness at the same time. And
yeah.
that's how I define spirituality. Spirituality is not what happens on a yoga mat, it's not what happens on a meditation cushion. It's what happens in your heart when you're confronted with two different seemingly opposing views. Can you
Mhm.
hold those two views in your awareness at the same time without having to play zero sum and make one of them good and the other one bad?
Oh, well said. I mean, you and I had a chance to talk about that a little bit on your podcast. People should go back and listen to that. But like we talked about the whole Maha thing and the sort of toxic tribalism within politics and how, especially with social media, that sort of nuance and context, you can't really convey that, right? If you talking about health and you feel like Bobby Kennedy is like an opportunity, right? Time will tell. But what you are seen as being like a complete advocate for everything the Trump administration does, but it's like those of us that are independent minded, wellness type outsiders, we're going to kind of tend to have like a nuanced perspective on these things. It's something you don't talk a lot about online. Like I'm glad you even brought that up. Like, you, do people misunderstand? Do you feel like people misunderstand you when you said what you said about Maha and more progressive minded people and like
I made
even
a conscious
associating yourself?
I made a
Yeah, go on.
conscious choice to be the inspiration guy, right? Like obviously as an adult, someone who's been on the planet for for 5 decades, I've got opinions about
Yeah.
pretty much everything. And what I've recognized, and the Israel Palestine thing really brought this to a head for me personally,
Mm-hmm.
is that Instagram is just not a place to get into these nuanced conversations. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not serving my higher purpose, which is to present that contradicting, viewpoint and see the best in both of those sides. Like people want you to choose. No, you have to pick a side because if you try to play the middle, and I'm not even really playing the middle, I'm doing what I do in my normal life, which
Yeah.
is if I'm confronted by something, whether it's a belief system within myself or something that someone else says, I've basically trained myself to be able to hear what they're saying, maybe I agree with it, maybe I don't. But then also to look at, okay, well, what do I like about this person and how they operate? What can I learn from this situation? What can I learn from the way they presented this information? And so my ultimate goal with taking that approach is to continue to be present, right?
Hmm.
Because it doesn't serve me in my personal life if I'm all bent out of shape by somebody who said something that I didn't like 4 hours ago online, and I'm still kind of carrying that with me and into all of my other relationships and friendships and conversations. That doesn't
Hmm.
serve me. What serves me is being able to reset. So after I post whatever I post, people can say whatever they want to say because I feel good about it. It feels aligned with what's in my heart. Then I can go and have a conversation with you. And I'm not thinking about what happened, 3 hours ago or what happened yesterday. I can
Yeah.
fully be here with you. So I think what I recommend is that, everybody articulate what your personal mission is and allow that to dictate how much or how little you engage with the trolls on social media.
Yeah.
And then when you and I talked, you're a friend of mine. You and I have talked about many things, and I like to have those conversations. So I don't mind talking about politics when it's a one-on-one situation,
Hmm.
and when there's a long form conversation with nuance and context. So I'm happy to bring it up in podcasts and
Yeah.
other long form formats. But these short, pithy quotes on Instagram, I've just decided that's not the place for me.
Yeah, that's wise, wise, wise. I mean, I mean, of course, I wouldn't expect nothing less. It's just, that's the truth. It is the truth. It is like, I don't think very many uh, arguments have been won in the comment section on Instagram or TikTok. As much as you think you're going to win that, you're going to get them, you're going to convince them, you're going to make them see your point. No, it is like an ego war, right? I know. That's how I try to do. I fail all the time, but I need to state what's in alignment with my mission and then let the comments be what they are, because I'm not going to shift the people that want to misunderstand you. It's like an exercise in futility to try to commit
Yeah.
those who do not have ears to hear. So I love that, man. Like, could we go back to that minimalism? Like, I want to know, because like I want to be that. Like, I want to be a complete minimalist. So like, give me the pro tips on how to be a minimalist. Where do I start?
Well, so just to be clear, my work on minimalism is more about the internal clutter, not about,
Okay.
cleaning out your cupboards and your closets and underneath your bed
Well,
and all that.
that's the origin. I've talked to sorry for interrupting. I've talked to space organizers that they told me on the podcast. They said that the most of the time it is the inner clutter that's begetting the outer clutter.
Mhm.
I don't have a lot of clutter, but I have more stuff than I. Well, I can't say that. I probably do have inner clutter, right? Let's be honest. But how do I start cleaning the inner clutter then, man? Like, where do I start?
It's the same thing with diet, man. Diet is almost a religion. Like the foods that we eat, there's an emotional connection. Our grandmom used to make this food. I can't stop eating that because I'm betraying my legacy or whatever the justification is. And with the internal clutter, it's an emotional connection, right? And maybe what I found, just to keep it really simple, people who grew up with a lot of instability and didn't have a lot of luxury things, they may be more inclined to accumulate those things because they can now.
Hmm.
And they've always longed for those things that they couldn't have when they were younger, right? So there could be that's playing out. And or just as a safety, a security blanket, right? This sort of just in case mentality, just in case I need this. I don't want to ever be in a situation where I feel like I can't get my needs met. In other words, I want to prioritize comfort in my life. And so
Hmm.
you get all this stuff in order to know that you can, make it through those next 5 minutes when you get a little bit uncomfortable. And then, of course, the most common one is just retail therapy. Like I'm bored or I'm stressed or my partner or the person that I like isn't texting me back fast enough. Let me distract myself by going online and just buying something. Maybe if I get the right makeup, maybe if I have the right, beauty products, maybe if I have the right clothing, then I can attracts the right person who's going to give me the attention that I deserve. And so we can focus on the stuff, or we can focus on the motivating factors that is driving the accumulation of stuff. And that's what I call spiritual minimalism, which is
Mm-hmm.
you intentionally target the internal clutter. And the way you do that is just by doing your inner work, stuff I've been talking
Mm-hmm.
about for forever: meditation, gratitude, you know, talk therapy. It works well for some people. Being out in nature, going for long walks, which is called flaneuring, which is a term from 18th century Paris, which means aimless walking and letting your heart be your guide, giving yourself the freedom of choicelessness, giving what you want to receive, things like that. Just very principled and always an inside out way of approaching these things.
Got it. And I want to dive into some of those practices to start to clean up that inner clutter.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll dive into that. So once we start to do those practices and finding that in to create awareness and stillness, then is it that the outer clutter, letting go of it, is easier? Is that the sort of ripple effect?
Exactly. Well, you find it less difficult to um I won't say letting it go is the goal, but I would say not being as attached to it
Yeah,
is the goal.
non-attachment.
So it can still be in your life, but like we experienced this recently with the fires in Los Angeles at the beginning of 2025. And people lost everything. And I had a few people. So I lived in Los Angeles, as you know, as I said, for like 16 years. So I knew a lot of people who lost stuff. And it's crazy because I got a few messages saying, Light, when I was putting together my emergency escape bag, I thought about you because I realized how little I actually need. I
Yeah.
realized how little was actually important to me. And
Mm,
unfortunately, if we're not in that kind of situation, we rarely do that assessment, right? And now that assessment for a lot of people was done within 10 minutes or 15 minutes. They
right.
heard that the thing was coming in their direction, and they literally had to scramble around and decide what's truly, truly, truly important to me.
Hmm.
And so the stuff that they ended up taking probably was not the stuff that they thought they would have taken had they had more time to think about it. And there's an exercise in my book Travel Light, which is about spiritual minimalism, where I talk about reflecting on your eulogy and what you ultimately want people to say about you, and
Hmm.
using that to determine what your values are, and then narrowing that down to say your top three values, which could be family, it could be your health, and it could be, you know, leaving something behind for your kids or something like that. And so then that becomes your new filter through which you make decisions. Is purchasing this thing, is eating this thing, is working out or skipping my workout going to help me achieve one of my three values: health, right? And family, and leaving something behind for my kids. And if it is,
Hmm.
it's an easy decision. If not, then maybe you don't do it. So
Yeah.
I think what people think they want, which is as many options as possible, is not really what's going to help you ultimately thrive. What helps you thrive is narrowing things down to just the essentials in terms of your values. Then choices are easier to make and you get rid of that analysis paralysis.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Okay. So we've kind of had that process. Let's assume somebody's done that work to cultivate more non attachment in their life, to not be defined by the things in their life, to realize that this is the inner clutter is clearing. So this outer clutter has to go. Like,
Mhm.
you mentioned having a backpack, not even a big back or backpacker's backpack, a small backpack. Like, how much clothes are we talking about? Like, what do you have materialistic item wise?
At the height of I don't do it anymore. Um, Now, granted, when I went to Colombia this past weekend, I just took a backpack. So whenever I travel, I just take my backpack because you just don't need more than that, right? But it ends up being about 20 to 30 items. Um,
Okay.
Obviously, it depends on where you're going, what the climate is, and et cetera, et cetera. But the key items, which is called a capsule wardrobe, 20 items, 30 items. I'm including little things like my phone charger. That's an item. So
Okay.
comes to
Okay.
it's not 30 pieces of clothing. The
Yeah.
clothing itself is probably 12 or 15 pieces, depending on where I'm.
Wow.
And again, that includes socks, it includes underwear, it includes t-shirts. I have one pair of pants, I have one pair of shorts, and I'll take maybe a zip up hoodie, a lightweight zip up hoodie. So right off the bat, we only have about eight more items left.
Yeah.
But what I recommend doing, and this is outlined in my book as well, but you don't really need the book to run this experiment. But I found this really helpful. And it's interesting because this happened sort of inadvertently before I went fully nomadic. I was traveling a lot. So when I would see you at Revitalize, that was happening in 2016, 17, 18, right? In that era.
Hmm.
And I was also traveling for workshops and retreats around the world. So I was pretty much on the road maybe 2 weeks out of every month. And I invested in a good carry on bag once. And I just started to notice, you know what? I keep packing the same stuff over and over. And these other items never quite make it into the bag, no matter what season it is.
Yeah.
And so that's how I sort of developed my capsule wardrobe. Now, for someone listening to this who's intrigued by this process, here's what I recommend you do. Take your carry-on bag if you have one and pack it as if you're going to go away for a week. Okay? You're not going anywhere, but you're going to pack your bag as if you're going away for a week, and you're going to keep that bag in your bedroom, and you're going to treat your bedroom like it's a hotel room or an Airbnb. And you're just going to live from your bag for those 7 days. And you're going to see what you actually use and what you don't use. And if you find that you forgot to pack something, take one item out and put that other item in. So it's a one for one exchange. Okay.
Mm.
And see how long you can go just using the clothes in your bag. And you keep running that experiment a few times in a row. And by the end of the month, you will have your capsule wardrobe. So then by the next time you go out of town, you don't have to sit there in your closet pondering, what should I bring? You've already road tested it. You already know what you need on a day-to-day basis. So try that experiment and you'll get your capsule wardrobe.
Oh my gosh. I am so like encouraged by that because it seems like such a great experiment, but also scary. Like I'm like, okay, letting go.
But
I don't
it's low barrier because it's in your house. So you
Yeah.
can
Yeah, yeah,
always,
yeah.
yeah, you can do whatever
No,
you
it's
need.
perfect. It's a great entryway, I think, for people that are curious about this and to see what really matters, right? All right. So I am curious about all right, inner clutter begets outer clutter. Start with the inner clutter first and kind of allows you to have different set of perspective on the outer stuff. But I would assume, does the outer minimalism enhance inner peace, calm, or like is it a big like cycle or not so much?
Now, whatever's happening externally is a reflection of what's going on internally.
Okay. All right.
As a principle, right? Maybe there are
Yeah, yeah.
exceptions here and there, but as a principle, you're out. You can have the most, and you see this all the time in places like LA. These people have these beautiful postmodern homes with mid-century furniture, and it's sparse and minimal, and they're freaking miserable inside,
Yeah, you're
right?
right.
And they're
Yeah,
sitting
you're
there
right.
thinking about suicide, 12 out of the 18 hours that they're awake.
Yeah,
So if it
yeah.
was true that our external environment translated to what we felt internally, then the people with the most resources who could create those beautiful environments would all be
Hmm.
very peaceful and happy inside, right? But
True.
instead, if you go to places like India, where there's much more reverence for the little things, for meditation practices, pretty much any household or any shop you go into, or even a taxi cab, it's going to have a little altar with gurus and with pieces of fruit that they've been offered to this spiritual tradition, right? There's just a daily reminder that who I am is much bigger than the confines of my individuality. And that little reminder translates to just a little bit more inner peace within. And it's funny because when you go to India, it's almost like the exact opposite of being anywhere in the West, where you can be in, again, a place like Los Angeles, New York. We have all the stuff in the world, right? But if you
Mm-hmm.
look in our eyes, what you see is chaos. You see confusion, you see anxiety, you see depression.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to India, externally, it's just pure chaos, noisy, cluttered, billions of people. But if you look inside in their eyes, you can sense a degree of peace that you don't really see in the
Yeah.
West.
Yeah.
And people have nothing compared to what we have in the West.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, my wife used to live in Uganda. She said the same thing. Like they didn't have all the resources, and of course, like water, food. Like
Yeah,
there's some
after your basic necessities.
basic necessities. Yeah. So once they had the basic necessities, there's a joy in their eyes that you just do not see here, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah. And the joy
Yeah.
in just the simple things and in the moment, being together, sharing a meal together, right? That's the
Yeah.
stuff that we're lacking, no matter how much.
Yeah.
In fact, the more money you have, usually the more you're lacking because you have all this control now over your environment and you don't really have to be around other people. So we think, again, that's the desire. That's what everybody desires. How we equate success with comfort, right? The more successful we are, the more comfortable we're supposed to strive to be. But
Yeah.
actually, that just makes you isolated and it
Hmm.
makes you disconnected from other people and then ultimately from yourself.
Yeah. I mean, like Biggie said, "More money, more problems." He was right. Talk about a prophet.
Prophet Biggie Smalls.
Christopher Prophet Christopher Wallace. All right, so let's go to meditate. I want to know like your like how did meditation find you? You grew up in Atlanta, right? Like what at what point was this like a thing this was your life. This is going to be your path in life.
That's a good question. When I reflect back, so I grew up in Alabama, but my family now
Okay.
lives in Atlanta. So kind of,
Got
but it's
it.
all the same area. So usually when
Okay.
people ask me where I'm from, I'll say Atlanta
Yeah, I
because
thought you were from Atlanta.
it's
All
just
right.
easier. It's just easier to
Yeah.
say because everybody's
Yeah.
heard of Atlanta. Not
Yeah.
many people have heard of Montgomery, Alabama.
Yeah.
But I remember the thing about that area is that it's known for its religion, right? It's called the Bible Belt. So
Hmm.
you have to go to church. Like your most parents make their kids go to church, which is I think it's the intention is great, but I remember sitting in church and just never really feeling connected to the way that religion was presented to me. Now, looking back, I realize it's because it was just boring. I didn't have a great preacher. The music wasn't all that great. And I experienced really powerful preaching and amazing, choirs later on in life, which made me have a different attitude around religion. But back when I was a kid, it just kind of turned me off a bit. And I had all these questions about the purpose of life and reincarnation and all these things that the religion didn't really have a lot of good answers for, meaning answers that satisfied my curiosity. Yes, there were answers, but they didn't really satisfy my curiosity, if I'm being honest. And it seemed like people weren't even really open to those questions. Like, why are you
Hmm.
asking those questions? Just sing the hymn, just listen to the sermon, et cetera, et cetera. So curiosity wasn't really encouraged. And so later on, many, many, many years later, I'm living in New York City and I come across this book called Conversations with God in my girlfriend's apartment in Brooklyn. And and that sounds like a religious book, but actually it's a spiritual book. And once I started reading it, I just couldn't put it down. Basically, if you never heard of this book, it's a dialogue between this guy and who he says is God. And he channeled the whole thing because he was frustrated in his life. He had questions, didn't have a lot of good answers. And one night, he felt called to pick up a legal pad and just start transcribing what he heard in his heart as he would ask these questions. And that became the manuscript for Conversations with God, which was a 3-volume series. And so it was all these really basic questions like, are there such thing as aliens? Why do bad things happen to good people? What happens when you die? How do you choose the life that you come? So all these really basic questions that I'd had my whole life. And I was like, holy crap, this is the key. This is the answer key to living life on planet Earth, as far as I'm concerned at this point in my life. And so that became my sort of gateway book into yoga, into meditation, and ultimately into spiritual studies because I started reading other books past that. And then couple years later, I decided to leave New York and move to Los Angeles and become a yoga teacher. And that's when I was introduced to my meditation teacher, who inspired me to want to start teaching meditation. And the rest is history.
Beautiful. So I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing that. So there are different schools of meditation and like very serious orthodox, schools, right? There's a whole science of it. There's like thousands of lineages of arts and science of meditation. Is there one that you gravitated towards? Is there one that you would say you're a student of or no?
Yeah. So I always make this disclaimer whenever I'm talking about meditation, is that meditation is a very generic word. It's kind of like doctor.
Yeah.
Okay. You could be a functional medicine doctor or you could be Dr. Dre. We don't know what's going on. So,
Yes, good point. Yeah, yeah.
there's many paths. And so like that with meditation, people could be like, yeah, this is gyrotonic meditation, or this is a walking meditation, or this is a meditation on politics, right? So there's, like you said, there's thousands of different pathways to meditation. Overall, what I have found the most helpful are the pathways that are easier for regular people. So here's what I say. If you don't remember anything else about this conversation, but you're interested in meditation, when you're considering a certain path of meditation and you're in the room with the people who have excelled the most at that particular path of meditation, look around the room and look at how they're dressed and look at their lifestyle. Now, if the people who have excelled the most are dressed kind of like you and they have a lifestyle that's similar to you, probably you are going to thrive in that particular meditation. However, if you look around that room and everyone's wearing a robe and everyone's vegan or vegetarian and everyone's only eating one meal a day and everyone's a celibate, probably that particular approach to meditation is going to be very difficult for you if you identify as more of a regular person and not
Mm-hmm.
as a monk. So, the style of meditation that I gravitated towards is called Vedic meditation, which is from India. And it's a very simple and easy understanding of how to meditate for regular people. And that's why I started to thrive once I started practicing that. Because prior to that, for those 4 or 5 years when I was in New York, I hated meditation. So I was a reluctant meditator because in hindsight, I realized that I was practicing more monastic traditions.
Got it. So that was like isolating. It wasn't like in alignment with something that was
Yeah.
sustainable for you.
The
Because then
people who were thriving at it were all monks. And I
right.
wasn't a monk. I wasn't interested in being a celibate or eating one meal a day or wearing robes or any of that stuff.
Yeah. Sounds horrible. Sounds horrible. But good for them, right? Different paths for
But if
different
that's what
people.
you're into, then you'll love those. The style I'm
Exactly.
describing, you won't be into.
Exactly.
Not extreme
That's what
enough.
it's the art of being well. We're all different, and it's okay to know that. Okay, so you're right because that even that if you're not a monk and you're trying to push that square peg through a round hole, that becomes a religion. Right? I mean, that is very much legalistic. Kind of you're stressing about meditation, which is like the opposite of why you're doing it. Right?
Well, that's what happens with Vipassana, right? Vipassana is the 12-day silent retreat, which is kind of like the Iron Man version of meditation.
Right. Right.
Say the meditation version of the Iron Man. And people go there, and a lot of people escape from the retreat center because it's very intense for someone who's never really done that much meditation. But the more telling sign is when people get back home. So the ones who can endure the 12 days or the 10 days of 12 hours a day of meditation hardly ever continue on with the homework practice, which is 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening, sitting with your back straight, staring at the wall, or having your gaze soft, or keeping your sensations right here and all that. Which again, if you're a monastic and you don't have to go to work, you don't have kids, you don't have bills, you don't care about the Super Bowl, you don't want to do any recreational activities, it's great. It's great. But if you're a regular person and you have a family and you have a desire to go to new restaurants, and you have a desire to have sex with your partner and all these things, it's really hard to fit that hour in the morning and hour in the evening. So again,
Hmm.
I'm not saying Vipassana is good or bad. I'm saying it doesn't meet the criteria of you feeling like you can thrive with it. Because if that were the case, you would happily meditate for an hour in the morning and an
Hmm.
hour in the evening. And 90% of the people that I talk to who go to these retreats come back and they stop meditating. So
Yeah.
that's, to me, is not an indicator that that's a practice that people are going to be able to thrive with.
Got it. So, what is a Vedic? Like for someone that's new to this, what would be an example of a Vedic meditation that they could start doing?
The Vedic tradition is an in-person teaching, and the reason why it's in person is because you get a mantra from your teacher,
Hmm.
and you learn how to use the mantra in a way that allows you to have the experience that everybody ultimately wants in meditation, which is that quiet mind, or
Yeah.
also known as the settled mind, right? And
Hmm.
you only meditate for about 15 to 20 minutes. And what ends up happening is, because you were trained by someone who understands how the mind operates in concert with the meditation, you end up getting to the end of the meditation, the 15 or 20-minute mark, and you don't want it to end because
Hmm.
you're not fighting the mind, which is what most people end up doing inadvertently in their meditation practice. And so it
Hmm.
leaves you wanting more, which makes you want to meditate again the next day. And so
Hmm.
that's how you're going to thrive in
Yeah.
meditation, is by wanting more. Just like if you wanted to be healthy with your diet, and you were eating in a way that, where maybe you're doing intermittent fasting or something like that, which you know obviously a lot about, and the stuff you're eating tastes so good that
Yeah.
16 hours later you can't wait to do it again. You don't
Yeah.
have to tell somebody to keep eating what they're eating, right? They just want to naturally, because they've learned how to prepare it in a way that just is so delightful that they'll happily seek it out no matter where they are. And so that's what I show people how to do, is how to meditate in a way that makes you look forward to doing it on a regular basis.
Wow. It's absolutely true. The parallels are so true because when you talk about any wellness change, where you an exercise, food, like you said, meditation, it's like if it's this grueling, gritting your teeth, miserable thing, and that's not to say there won't be a time of something new being uncomfortable and expanding and growth there. I get that, but that's not what we're talking about here. The sort of unsustainability of it is, if you like hate it and abhor it, it's not sustainable, and the consistency is key to see the benefits of all of these different things within wellness. So that I had a question that I wanted to ask, which is kind of so tied to what you just said. Is, well, what do you say to somebody that says, well, meditation's not for me, because you said something like they're fighting with their mind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what it seems to me is that it's not the meditation, it's how they're meditating, is how you would say it.
Exactly. I equate it to swimming, right? Now, if someone said swimming is not for me,
Yeah.
anyone who swims would interpret that as, oh, well, you just haven't learned how to swim properly, obviously.
Right.
Once
Yeah.
you learn
Yeah.
how to swim, how to tread water, then you can actually have a quite enjoyable experience in the pool. But if you don't know how to tread water, that same body of water becomes an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
And you're deathly afraid of getting in it. So it really comes down to a question of mechanics, learning the mechanics, learn how to move in concert with the water, and in meditation, learn how to move in concert with the mind. And once you do that, you'll see that you actually don't have a monkey mind. You don't have a body that's too antsy for meditation. You
Hmm.
actually have a beautiful mind, and you have a body that's perfectly built for resting, which is what we need to do on a daily basis in order for the body to be able to do all of the wonderful things that it's designed to do, such as fight off infectious diseases and viruses, such as reproduce, such as digest your food, such as balance your hormones, and all of those things. If your body is not getting an opportunity to rest, then those things start to become harder and harder and harder to do. And that's where
Hmm.
you have to go to the hospital and the doctor and come and see people like you, because they have all these inexplicable, symptoms that they have no idea where they're coming from. And, people who are familiar with the biology understand that stress plays a big role on the body's ability to heal itself. And that's all meditation does, is it puts the body in a more optimal position to get rid of stress. And
Hmm.
as you get rid of stress, your quality of rest goes up. So there's no such thing as meditation is not for you. It's kind of like saying sleep is not for me, right?
Yeah.
Or sleep is for you. You may not
Right.
be getting that sleep because you got a shitty mattress, or oh,
Yeah.
maybe you're trying to sleep standing up or doing something crazy. But once
Yeah.
you learn the mechanics of sleep, you'll find that your body can fall asleep quite easily. And once you learn the mechanics of meditation, you'll find that your mind can de-excite quite easily as well.
Yeah, great analogy. I always use the analogy for people that said that telehealth patients. It's like, well, it's saying like the gym's not for you, right? Because a lot of people have poor vagal tone, their nervous system's dysregulated, they're hypervigilant. Yeah, if I had like never worked out and I went to the gym and I was sore the next day, it was uncomfortable, it didn't come naturally. Yeah, it's like I've never done it before. I have weak whatever musculoskeletal system. That's what you're talking about here. It's like, yeah, find the right exercise for you, or find the right meditation for you and stay consistent with it and something you can stick with. So like, what is that entry point? Like, how would you describe it on a podcast for someone to start to quiet that monkey mind?
Look, I think that teaching yourself meditation is like teaching yourself how to drive or teaching yourself how to swim. It's going to be very
Got it.
difficult. So, in anticipation of that, I have written a book called Bliss More: How to Succeed in Meditation Without Really Trying. And this is the book that I wish I had when I was back in those New York days, struggling to meditate, being a reluctant meditator before I met my teacher. And if you get that book, and you can get it, okay, there's a really great summary of it on YouTube for free. It's like
Okay.
15-20 minutes. When I first saw this, I was like Googling the book, and and I saw that some Indian guy put up a summary of it, and I was like, what is this bullshit? And I listened to it. I was like, actually, this is pretty good. This gives you a good, launch point.
Yeah.
And then also the audio version of the book is on Spotify. So if you have a subscription to Spotify, you can search Blissmore on Spotify, and you can listen to the entire audio book, I guess, for free as well. So there are some complimentary resources out there. But if you don't have Spotify, or if you don't have access to YouTube, or if you want the full thing, get a copy of the book on Amazon, and it'll walk you through step by step, literally from knowing nothing about meditation to how to succeed in meditation without really trying. And I'm using those words very intentionally because for me, there's only one metric for success in meditation, and that metric is, do you enjoy it? Do you find it delightful? Because if you don't, I don't care how many benefits the meditation promises to deliver into your life, you're not going to do it because that's just how we
Hmm.
are. We
Yeah.
just don't do things that we don't enjoy. But if you do enjoy it, you don't have to even care about the benefits, and you will
Yeah.
have every single one of those benefits because you just enjoy the practice so much. So my goal with that book is to get you where you just enjoy meditating, which is going to separate you from 95% of the other people out there who call themselves meditators, because
Hmm.
most people are just, it's the blind leading the blind. People are using shoddy guesswork. People think that all you have to do is sit on a cushion and close your eyes, and now you're meditating. And that's kind of like turning up at Venice Beach with a surfboard and thinking, oh yeah, surfing is just taking this board and going out into the ocean and just, hopping up on it. Well, you got to
Yeah.
practice all that stuff. You have to
Mm.
know how long of a board do you need, right?
Yeah.
You have to know how thick of a wetsuit you need. You need wax on the board. You need to know how to carry the board into the ocean so it doesn't slap you in the face and break your nose. You have to know where to sit on the board. You have to practice hopping up because that's a very specific skill. So, in other words, there's 1,000 different considerations in order
Yeah.
to have an enjoyable surfing experience. And if you don't
Yeah.
know all those considerations, you're going to be miserable, right? Same with meditation. There are 1,000 little considerations. What happens if you fall asleep? What happens if you start itching? What happens if you start having a certain type of thought that makes you feel reactive, right? Once you understand how to navigate all these little considerations, it's actually a quite enjoyable experience.
Yeah, the paradox of it all. What I've seen some people, again, this is without a teacher, so this makes complete sense. But like, I've seen people that have different past traumas or anxiety disorders, different nervous system dysregulation issues, where even the idea of closing their eyes, the idea of being alone with their thoughts is just too scary. I'm sure you've seen that before. Many people that haven't gone through that don't even know that exists. But meditation can be scary for some people, right?
Yeah, and that's why again having someone to kind of
A
guide you
teacher.
through it is very
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
Because if your mind feels like a haunted house, the
Yeah.
the haunted house with you, you're going to find it a lot easier to go into that house versus doing it by yourself. And when you understand where those thoughts are coming from, because those are not, arbitrary. There's a
Hmm.
reason why you're having those thoughts and not other thoughts. And
Yeah.
it's not some kind of esoteric reason. It's a very specific biochemical reason why you could be having those thoughts.
Yeah.
Short answer is because those thoughts left those experiences that you had when you were younger left an impression in your nervous system in order to protect you from future experiences that could also lead to you feeling distressful. And so when you start meditating, typically some of the first thoughts you have are those distressful thoughts because that's an indication of what's leaving your body.
Hmm.
It's not an indication that your mind is corrupted. It's an indication that your body is becoming less and less stressed. And
Yeah.
so having that reminder, which I talk about in my book, Bliss More, is going to help to make it a little bit easier to navigate those experiences.
Love it. Growing up, in the South, in Alabama, in Atlanta, what does when your family heard, okay, he's meditation teacher now, did they get it? And do they get it now?
Look, growing up in middle America, right?
Yeah.
um, in a very heavy TV watching culture, which is what I spent all of my free time doing as a kid, is watching TV, just perched right in front of the television, probably sitting too close to the television. You learn to appreciate and to admire celebrity. And so, as I was, getting into the meditation stuff, what I was doing prior to that was I was in the fashion industry. I was a model and I had some moderate success. I was on some billboards, I was in some, magazines, and that was what my family was most proud about were my external accomplishments in the fashion industry. So for the first 5 or 7 years of me being a meditation teacher, they would introduce me as a former model. This is my brother, he's a former model. Because they
Yeah.
just couldn't really make sense of the whole meditation thing. And really,
Right. Right.
we're talking 2005. So this is before there was this big wellness industry and
Yeah.
celebrity meditation teachers and stuff like that. But then once I started writing books, then they started introducing me as an author. Then once it got out that I had worked with some celebrities and and had those kind of relationships, then they started to understand, oh wow, my brother's very he's having a big impact in the world. And so
Yeah.
they just like something to brag about. And
Yeah. Yeah.
telling someone you're a meditation teacher in 2006 doesn't have a lot of gravitas as
Yeah.
much as telling someone that you were on a billboard in Times Square or something like
Yeah.
that.
Man, that's
So I
interesting.
get it.
Makes complete sense. Yeah, no, I'm from the same. I hear you on that. All right. So, but before we go, my friend, the podcast, it's called The Art of Being Well. At the end of every episode, we have your Art of Being Well. This is Light Watkins' Art of Being Well. What is the worst tasting food that you eat in that nomadic life of yours? You do it for the health benefits, not the taste. Is there a food that checks those boxes for you?
Fennel.
There
I
you
can't
go.
I can't
Fennel.
stand fennel, the taste of fennel. That licorice taste, I've never been a fan of the licorice taste.
Yeah.
So was it anise and
Any
fennel?
seed, yeah. I'm right there with that's on my list for sure. Things I do not enjoy, but I will have it. I will have
Mhm.
it. All right. Do you take
Toothpaste
supplements?
with fennel in it? Ugh,
Oh man, I've
disgusting.
I've had that toothpaste. I
Like
know
who
what you're
does that?
talking about. No, it's a thing, but not for me. Just once, and then I'll never get it again. But what's do you take supplements? And if so, like what are two maybe out of the box, less known supplements? Do you do that?
I don't take a lot of supplements, but I do take fish oil
Okay.
supplement. And
I would.
I
Yeah.
I've done some AG1, which is I guess a combination of a bunch of
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah.
But
They're a
I do try to
sponsor on
get
the
sun every
podcast.
day. I got to try to sit in the sun for like an hour a day usually
Yeah.
for
Get
my
some
vitamin
vitamin
D.
D. Get some heat shocking proteins. Love it. All right. Where's someone you have? I mean, you're living this nomadic life.
Mhm.
What's somewhere you haven't been to, but it's in your mind's eye. It's gonna happen.
I wouldn't mind going to like Vietnam or Southeast Asia, going to Thailand, um, visiting South America. Those are the two areas that I haven't really spent a lot of time in. And maybe Russia as well. Like Russia seems like a very beautiful country with all of
Yeah,
its lakes, and I love Russian food because it's very fresh. So, yeah, I would say those are the areas.
perfect. What is somewhere you have been to that is very underrated that you think other people should, add it to their list?
I was telling someone last night from Hungary. I was like, one of the best places I've ever been is Budapest. I really, really enjoyed Budapest. You don't hear it a lot, you
Yeah.
don't see it on social media a lot, but I went there back in like 2009 and just had the most amazing time. It was an unplanned trip where I just took a capsule wardrobe. It was one of my first times doing that. And just a quick story about it, about the culture. I literally landed. So my experiment was to take a one-way trip somewhere and make no plans, not even where I'm going to stay that night. So I arrived at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I had my backpack, and I went to the city center. Just took a random shuttle to the city center from the airport. Was walking around. This is like prior to like the Google Maps days, like we were still transitioning to all of that.
Hmm.
And I found this park bench at this museum that was closed, and I was like taking a little nap on the park bench because I was jet lagged. Got up a couple hours later, went to a cafe to charge up my flip phone. There was this woman studying something. I didn't know if she was from Hungary or where she was from, but I kind of did the charades thing for her to watch my stuff while I went to the bathroom. Came back, she goes, she strikes up a conversation in English. What are you doing here? Oh, I'm just here visiting. When did you arrive today? Where are you staying? I don't really have a place to stay yet. Oh, you can stay in my extra room. My roommate just left town for the month, so you can stay in his room.
Wow.
And it wasn't like some creepy thing. She had a boyfriend, and but she was just very kind-hearted, and it was a confirmation that when you're kind-hearted and you go somewhere, frequency is attracted to like frequency, and you end up everything just falls into place some way
Yeah.
somehow. And I don't want to sound like that kind of airy fairy person because I'm really not, but I've had so many other experiences like that, and I end
Yeah.
up just having this wonderful time. I didn't really even see her that much while I was there, right? She had her
Hmm.
thing, I was doing my thing, but it was a great time. She didn't charge me anything even though I offered to pay. um, and yeah, and it just wasn't overly touristic. It was kind of sparse and really quaint cafes and stuff. So I would say Budapest.
I love that story. And there is something ineffable, but so true about resonance and synchronicity, like exactly what you're saying, these truths within our world, whether we notice them or not, right? Alignment. My friend, this has been a blessing. Thanks for coming on. I knew this would be a great conversation. Where do people go to learn more about your work, get all the books? Where do they go?
Lightwatkins.com is the hub for all of my social media. I'm at Light Watkins on most social media platforms. And yeah, books, podcasts, they can listen to our conversation there and everything.
My friend, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.